regulations are being finalized, the reality of what they've gotten themselves into starts to set in, and that's when groups get very serious. A lot of times this is when groups start falling apart because the proper foundation wasn't laid. So I think it's just the overall process that they're not expecting.
Your background is really interesting because not only are you consulting, but you also own a cannabis business, but your background is insurance claims. Why do you think it's difficult for the insurers to evaluate the risk for this industry?
I think it comes down to a lack of knowledge, historical data, and exposure to the industry. To evaluate risk and assign a monetary value to it, you have to first know what the risk is. You have to know what the historical data is as it relates to any given industry and the associated risks with it. This industry is still in its infancy, and there are a ton of unknowns. The operator is always going to understate the risk, and the underwriter is always going to want to make sure they're not exposing themselves. Give the industry a couple of years, and carriers will have historical data they can look to guide them. But I think that's why it's difficult to evaluate the risk for an insurer. It really comes down to lack of knowledge, historical data, and exposure.
So, Avis, the security and the ventilation systems, to my knowledge, that is something that plays a large role in the building and has less of an impact with the insurers. Am I correct on that?
Yes and no. It does have an impact on it, but again, because the carriers don't have that exposure to the industry, they don't truly appreciate or accept the security measures that go into any operation. Just to put it into perspective, for instance, a 50,000 square foot cultivation facility is going to have about $150,000 to $200,000 worth of security cameras and systems. A dispensary, about 2,000 to 3,000 square feet of it, the security system's probably going to cost them in the neighborhood of $80,000 to $120,000. If this same thing applied to a traditional business, insurance carriers would take that into consideration and it would be reflected in the premium. In this industry, it doesn't make too much of a difference.
Martina, I'm going to go back to you. How does medical cannabis compare to other medications?
Well, just with regard to the legal context, obviously, one of the interesting things about cannabis is that it was historically, it's been illegal for a long time. With most prescription medications that have an impact on the way your brain works or the way your body works, the person, the entity, the scientist who invented the drug controls the first wave of research because they're studying this chemical compound, trying to prove that it has a good benefit, trying to prove that it doesn't have any side effects. With cannabis, we're at a disadvantage because we have the FDA all studies have to go through the FDA. For example, in 2013, there were actually 2,000 studies on cannabis, but only 6% of those studies set out to show a benefit. The rest of the studies set out to show a risk. So we have a situation where, as far as peer-reviewed medical literature that you can use in a court of law, there's a lot more negative than there is positive, even though we have a lot of other information that shows that there are many medical benefits. But the difference between word-of-mouth benefit and the kind of information that gets into a court of law is very different. So it's incumbent upon the people in the industry to keep doing everything we can to put people in office who are going to push to make this a Schedule II drug so that we can get more research done that shows the benefits.
Are there product cases already in progress?
Yes, up in Colorado, Combs versus Broadway Melt. A really interesting case, actually. Soon after Colorado went recreational, there was a county fair. Obviously, there's ordinances that prevent people from handing out live THC samples in public. But there was a pot pavilion, and business owners were, handing out samples, and at least one plate of samples was actually a live sample. There were several people who claimed that they had a really bad experience from that. One person in particular who supposedly had never used cannabis in his life, that's what he's saying, became so paranoid, his heart was racing, he was brought to the hospital. By the time the experience was over, he thought that his wife was trying to kill him. Certainly there's medical records that show that this occurred, right? And you can see that if he truly didn't know that he was consuming THC, that would be a disturbing experience. There were several other people who sought medical care because they didn't know what was wrong with them, and it turned out to be THC. What's interesting about the Combs case is that,
Martina, can we get back to that? We're gonna take a short break, but when we come back, we'll be joined by Martina Giaccarino and Avis Baboulian. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
Grassroots Marketing will return after we generate traffic to our generous sponsors.
Great websites today need expert web design and development and need to be e-commerce ready and mobile friendly. But building a marketable and profitable website can be an uphill climb. Ready to make your new website or replace your existing website? Think Orange as the new way to get in the black. Orange Hill Development works with Fortune 500 companies and offer the same top quality development service at a fraction of what other providers charge. Brands like Absolute, Carlsberg, and Nestea trust Orange Hill Development. Find out why you should trust your website with Orange Hill. Contact Orange Hill for a consultation today at orangehilldevelopment.com.
Your connection to quality cannabis insurance services is spelled Kaercher. That's Karcher Insurance. We have worked with ventures like cannabis for over 60 years. We're proud to represent over 50 companies with tailor-made cannabis plans for owners just like you to insure your product, your plants, and your pursuits. Kaercher spells out their full-service insurance services ranging from commercial to bonds to personal, from life to health, and more. Contact the team at KarcherInsurance.com and let our experience work for you. That's Kaercher Insurance.com.
Contact Karen and the team at Karcher Insurance at 1-844-421-3560. That's 844-421-3560.
Growing green to generate more green.
Hello to all you happy herbalizers, smiling trippy hippies, and everyone who believes in freedom and tolerance. This is The Grow Show, and I'm Kyle Cushman.
From food to fuel, from remedy to resource.
Welcome my guest, Ed Rosenthal, the guru of ganja. Let me ask you, right now I hear your lighter clicking. Are you smoking indoor or are you smoking sun-grown?
What am I smoking? I'm smoking concentrate.
Way to get out of the answer there. So you're truly like the king, right? You just clap your hands and somebody brings you a bowl and you're all set, right?
I wish that were the case.
The Grow Show with Kyle Cushman, only on CannabisRadio.com.
We're back with more motivating marijuana monetization insights on Grassroots Marketing, only on CannabisRadio.com.
We're joined by Martina Giaccarino and Avis Baboulian. Martina, we were talking about the case in Colorado.
Well, I think one of the important points that MME owners, people who actually are invested in the industry, can take away from that situation is there was one person who probably had a valid experience with a valid claim. It's now a class action because when people find out that someone is getting money because there was a live THC sample where there should not have been, it's amazing. And if you don't document the intentions of the people that you deal with, stoned will be an actionable side effect. There will be people who claim that they didn't intend to take THC. There will be people who claim that they didn't intend to get high or get stoned. So you really have to obviously control where the product goes, then also understand what your customer's intentions are, because you may need that documentation later. In Combs 2, obviously, the fact that someone apparently drugged people without their consent, I mean, that's a crime. Maybe the person meant it to be funny or to be fun, but that's a pretty serious event, and whether or not the manager was present or what their employment practices are will go into whether or not the people who own the business are liable for the event. But it's instructive for a lot of reasons.
So you're saying at that point when that transpired that they were thinking that there was no product there, the chocolate or what have you, was laced with the THC and someone put that there.
Right, exactly. There were signs all over saying that there was no THC in any of the samples because it was actually against the county ordinance to have live samples there. in contradiction to those signs, there were live samples there. Now, probably some of the people who entered the pavilion wanted a live sample and were offered one on the fly. But there's at least one person who's claiming, I didn't want a live sample, I just felt like eating a candy bar and ate an entire chocolate bar. So that's like 16 doses, had a really bad experience. The reality is that that's not really an unforeseeable event. I mean, that's what happens when you have something that goes from being absolutely forbidden controlled to being legal. There's going to be people who try it who've never tried it before simply because it was illegal.
So do MME businesses need to consider the stoned side effect or a side effect?
They absolutely do. When they first have a new patient comes to a dispensary, they need to document that patient's intentions. And the reason for that is that, for better or worse, most cannabis strains are mind-altering substances. And although in the industry, many people like the impact that they get from cannabis, but particularly here in Nevada, it's legal only for medical purposes. So, for example, in a courtroom, it would be quite credible for someone to come and say that they were there because they wanted the medical benefit from the product, but they did not expect to get high, stoned, paranoid. Those are all side effects, and I think cannabis is probably a lot safer than opiates. But for comparison purposes, the reality is that if someone has a prescription for an opiate or a mood stabilizer, the warnings on that bottle identify basically mind-altering symptoms as being side effects. That's not what they're intended to do. And in places where cannabis is being sold as medication, stoned is a side effect.
Absolutely it is. And so that's just something that happens, and people need to understand that. Does a medical marijuana business owner have to worry about the product getting into the hands of a child? The parent's responsibility.
Well, it really depends on the facts of the situation. What I can tell you is that the owner is responsible for products getting in the hands of any reasonably foreseeable user. For example, let's just talk about cookies that don't have THC in them. I can tell you that I have literally observed my 4-year-old climbing the pantry as if it were a ladder to get a forbidden cookie. Literally, this is my personal experience. Now, most people have kids. So you have to anticipate that when you're selling a product that is in the form of candy and cookies and things like that, it is going to be attractive to kids. If you sell that product in a child-proof package, if you have your patients fill out paperwork that documents the age of their kids, that documents that you offered them like a lockbox, a safe, then you have a lot better chance of saying that it was not foreseeable to you that your product would end up in the hands of a child. But the law on products liability is there are many situations where kids are exposed to things that they're not supposed to be exposed to, and it's not that often that it's mommy's fault. It really depends on the strength of your warnings and the strength of your preventative acts. Obviously here, we require child-proof packaging. But what happens once the package is open? If the package has more than one serving, what are you telling your patients to do once they open the package?
Do we have products in place that would prevent children or people that are not supposed to have in their hands?
There are drug safes. In fact, there's a business called Drug Safe. I think the state-of-the-art drug safe has a fingerprint lock. So you put your medications in there, not just for cannabis, for any kind of dangerous medication, which is, frankly, most medications. If you take a whole bottle of antibiotics, you're not going to feel good either. So a dispensary should be carrying those, obviously because we would prefer to prevent a child being injured, but also from my standpoint as your defense attorney, I want to have the document that shows that you carry this product to your customer and your customer declined this product because it helps us.
Ava, since you are consulting with not only the cultivation, the production, but the dispensaries, the people who own all three, from the cultivation center to the dispensary, do you advise them on the risks involved in the packaging aspects of it?
Oh, absolutely. I always advise on inserts, labeling. Usually with state licenses, there are very strict state regulations that operators have to comply with. I always suggest for them to go a little bit above and beyond what the state regulations are asking of them. I'll give you an example of traditional business. You go